Casting live from the universe.
Yay!
Really lovely to have people watching online, have our lovely in-person audience. And of course, most importantly, we're really delighted to be joined today by Fearne, who does not need my introduction in any way, shape or form. Of course, a globally recognized broadcaster, author, podcaster. And yeah, we're really delighted to be chatting today. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's lovely. And you have such a gorgeous office. I was saying when I arrived, green and pink are my two favourite interior design colours. So I'm
you're literally living the brand, right?
I am.
Very, very good. Look, Fearne, it's such a pleasure to be chatting about something that we care so much about at YuLife, which is how to really inspire people to live their best lives, to live a happy life. And you've hundreds of people, you've had so much content about this. We'd love to just start off, joy in the workplace. What does that mean to you?
Well, I think it, first of all, depends where you work. And I think that's changed for people massively over the last couple of years. Before what we've just lived through, people were predominantly in the workspace exclusively. Whereas now I think there's a much more sort of open approach to it and flexible working conditions. So I think it really depends on the individual as well. There are some friends of mine that have found that transition really tricky and would way prefer to be with other people, with colleagues, bouncing off ideas, having that sort of social interaction. Whereas someone like me, I like to do both. I really like to be on my own. I love working on my own in absolute silence. But then I also like the buzz of doing things like this, talks and communicating with people. But I think if you are working in an office space, I think the most important thing for happiness is just for there to be open communication. I've worked in, weirdly, quite a lot of offices over the years, because a lot of the jobs, like when I worked at Radio 1, required me to go into the office every day before the show to know what the station messaging was, to see the team, then to go into the studio. And you don't want to walk into an atmosphere that feels sterile or that people aren't approachable. And we were just discussing before we went live, how important it is for, either CEOs, managers, line managers to have that accessibility, that people can approach them and that they're showing vulnerability from the top, able to sort of discuss life openly and talk about human stuff, feelings and life-related stuff, rather than it just being work. So that's probably my personal take on it from experience. But actually, over the last couple of years, doing lots of talks like this and meeting lots of people that work for different corporations, it seems that if there's that sort of very human approach from the top, then everybody else relaxes into that and feels they can also turn up to work just in whatever mood they're in that day without having to put a suit of armor on to enter the workplace.
So really, it was written on the wall. We put it on all of our t-shirts, that kind of mantra of love being you.
Yeah, I love that.
That's something that you've articulated that really beautifully. It's not running a company, right? It's hard. You've got a lot of pressures. You're trying to figure out how to achieve what you need to as a business.
Yeah.
And reminding yourself every single day that it's not just about what you do, it's about how you do it. Not just because that's the way it impacts people and makes your employees feel amazing, but that also impacts what you end up achieving.
Yeah.
So people care and people are passionate.
Yeah, I think if your team know, like even you just saying that there, it's hard. And for people to see that you'll have days where you're struggling or you're overwhelmed or whatever, because you can always look at the boss and go, oh, it's all right for them. They know what they're doing. They feel confident and they've got it all sussed. And it's everyone's, everyone turns up to work. Either they might not have slept because you've got 4 kids or whatever it might be. And I think it's really good if you can be open enough to say, yeah, I've had a tough morning at home, or I didn't sleep last night, feeling a bit wobbly. That gives people permission to go, oh, I'm not feeling great. Or on good days to boost everybody else. Like, yeah, I'm feeling resilient today, I'm feeling good. I think to have that open dialogue is so important.
Appreciate that. And look, a lot of our audience here and online also HR directors, and often feel like they're bearing the brunt,
of course,
of everyone else's emotional heartache in the company, or day-to-day struggles. As a mother, as a leader, combining that, being a caregiver in an organization, not caregiver, that's the wrong phrase, but being in a caring role with an organization, looking after yourself. What do you best advice for that?
Well, I think you and most people here would agree that is probably the hardest challenge, is making time for yourself, to give yourself a break, because I think we're all really hard on ourselves and we always think we could be doing better. We could have if that isn't a caregiving role of sort of looking out for people, or just within your own expectations of how you want things to run. We're so tough on ourselves. So I often think it's really just about giving yourself a break. I'm saying this for myself more than anyone because I don't do it often enough. Yeah. And probably every couple of months I'll have a period where I feel so overwhelmed. I feel like it's just everything's getting on top of me. You know, we have a team now at Happy Place of about 15 people who they work at my management company who I've gone into business with, but we're all part of a team. We have regular board meetings. It's really important that we all communicate constantly and cross-pollinate ideas and how one division's working with the other, because we've got some big stuff coming up, like our Happy Place Festival in the summer. And we've got a really exciting thing that I'm not allowed to talk about yet, launching later in the summer.
Watch this space, guys.
Watch this space. So there's loads going on. And I think I'm imagining, like you, love what I do. I feel very lucky, very privileged that I adore my job. So I don't necessarily walk in the door and think, oh, I'm home, switch off, because I'm excited about what I'm doing the next day or an idea we've already started on. So I think that's the trouble a lot of the time, not allowing my brain to switch off and go, let's just put that aside for a minute, just relax. You haven't got to think about anything, strategize, plan, brainstorm, just let it go. I think, you know, that I certainly haven't sussed that one out. I just am aware that I probably need to give myself a bit more time and space, but I am also like an excited kid who wants to keep creating and doing stuff. So I think it's really difficult to get that balance.
Really appreciate that. I resonate with that very much.
Yeah, I bet.
I'm sure most of our audience do as well. You know, when you're looking after people, you go into something because you want to do it, because you want to do a good job. It's a lovely it's a phrase that's always stuck with me. A guy called Bruno Bettelheim wrote a book called Good Enough Parenting.
Oh,
and it's something that kind of applies in life in general. Like 70% is first. It's good enough, you know?
Yeah, and some days you only have the energy to be average, and that's absolutely fine. You know, I think obviously due to social media and just how the digital world works now, there's this sort of weird, elusive perfectionism that we're all trying to attain, which doesn't exist. You know, we can push ourselves to an extent, but if it's detrimental to you physically or mentally, it's probably more mental a lot of the time for many of us. What is the point of it? You know, if we're comparing ourselves to others constantly, thinking that we could have done better every day and beating ourselves up, it's just futile. So I think we do need to give ourselves a break. We do need to just be average some days and not then play it over in your head a million times afterwards with regret, and just let things go a bit more easily, be a bit more flexible, and just go, I'll try again tomorrow and see what happens.
That's a really powerful point. I see it in, you know, the tech space as startup founders smashing it, nailing it, 100 million, 10,000 new customers. Look at us. You know, the whole tech crunch startup world is full of, you know, everyone's always smashing it.
Yeah.
And that's lovely, because I'm sure everyone is constantly, and it's just us that's not. But,
but are they? But are they? Because also that's the thing, we can look at stats and numbers, or just people saying I'm smashing it.
Yeah.
But of course there's that like deeper layer, which is how are they feeling on a personal level? You know, they could be running the most successful company, but going home at night feeling unbelievably stressed. You know, they might be insanely tough on themselves and just feel broken from it. They can have stuff going on personally, which isn't ideal. So again, I think we've got to be so careful to not just keep going into that compare and despair model of, oh, everyone else is doing so well and I'm not. Because actually I think what's more valuable is, you know, you've got this gorgeous space, you've got all these lovely people who obviously really love working with you, and pink giraffes and all these fun things going on, a breakfast you can go and help yourself to. I would rather have a company that operates like that, with a real feel-good culture, rather than people that are smashing it where everyone's stressed and pulling their hair out. So I think it's about what your values are, really.
It's a really lovely point. You mentioned Yu-Gi our giraffe, but we picked a giraffe as our mascot, right? Because insurance isn't always known as being an industry that's filled with love and care. But giraffes have got the largest heart of any land animal.
Is that correct?
That is correct.
I'm learning here today. I did not know that.
Yu-Gi our
I thought it was something to do with like long neck, reaching high.
Also very good. You could, you know.
I don't know. That was my initial thought.
Seeing above the trees, you know, perspective.
Oh, there's many dimensions to the giraffe.
But coming at insurance, or an industry that financial services in general, that aren't known for really looking after their people or their customers as well as they should.
Yeah.
That's something that really resonates
I love it, and it's a great mascot to have.
Yeah, also you get lots of fun, you know, giraffe keylings. And
Haven't you got a giant one somewhere as
There's
well?
a 6-foot one. We'll bring it out.
Yeah. I want to see this guy.
Yeah. It's, a part and soul of our company. You've, like I said before, you've interviewed some of the most amazing people, thought leaders, our very own Dr. Rongan Chatterjee, who's
love
Chief
Rongan.
Wellbeing Officer. Maybe from some of these real leaders and people that you've been inspired by, what's the most inspiring conversation you've had?
It's a really tricky one to pick because we've done nearly 200 episodes now. I can't think of the exact number, but we've done a lot. And they're all an hour plus. So really, or maybe some just shy of an hour, but hearty conversations where I'm not just sort of going, tell me about your album out, or, you know, the stuff I used to kind of do, which nothing wrong with that, but we're going deep. So I have been lucky enough to walk away with so many brilliant bits of advice, storytelling, which I think is so important, just to listen to people's stories and learn from other people's life experience. But there is one that really, really sticks out. And it's probably one of the most incredible conversations I've ever had in or outside of work. Wow. And it was all quite sort of fortuitous how I ended up speaking to this amazing man. He's called Bjorn Nathiko Lindblad, and he was a forest monk for many, many years. He's Swedish origin and moved all around the world as a forest monk, and you know, had lots of beautiful stories about that time in his life. Then a bit later down the line, decided that he would go back to just regular living and leave monastic living behind him after, I think, 17 years. Wow. And, you know, met the love of his life, and, you know, obviously took all of his practices and learning into his life, and was doing lots of talks and sort of spreading the word that way, and discussing his sort of knowledge and what he'd learned. And then sadly was diagnosed with ALS, which is obviously a really awful illness to get, and passed away about a month after we recorded the podcast. But he knew at the time of us recording that he had about a month to live. So he was talking about death in a way that I hadn't experienced before. It wasn't bleak, it wasn't heavy, it was actually really beautiful and expansive and sort of liberating, talking about it without it being awkward. You know, I didn't feel awkward asking the questions because I knew that he was very open to discussing the subject, and he felt it's very important to sort of, you know, give other people that wisdom. So that was really interesting in itself. Beautiful. But he had this one mantra that one of his sort of head monks, I don't know what the appropriate name is, I'm so sorry, but one of the head monks back in the day, the forest leaders, gave him this one mantra that never left him, and it became the name of the title of his book, and it has always stuck with me. And the mantra is, I may be wrong. And it's so interesting when you walk into a situation where there's conflict or confrontation, or even, and we do this all the time, when we get a bit defensive, someone says something and you go, no, I didn't, or, oh, well, yeah, that's because, and you instantly go on the defense. We all do it. Our ego's trying to protect whatever's going on. But if you can have that in the back of your head, I may be wrong, it doesn't mean that you necessarily are, but it's the openness to go, okay, I see the other person's perspective maybe, or there's room for me to allow that in. And I don't have to be going, this is my point of view, this is what I need to get across. I have to end up right at the end of this. So as difficult and humbling as it is to pull that one out of the bag, if you can have it just rumbling in the back of your brain when you walk into tricky situations, it is a bit of a leveler. And I think, you know, his wisdom allowed him to really get stuck into that one. I still use it sort of with trepidation, like, oh God, I may be wrong. This is awful. Like, I'm going to try and say I may be wrong, but it's a really good one.
That's really good one.
Yeah.
You just take a breath on that and say, I may be wrong. Like, that's
it's hard, but it's so good.
That's a really, really beautiful point.
Yeah.
Look, you know, you've been sharing these kind of messages, and it was in 2018 that you launched your
I guess so. Right? It's all a bit blurry. I mean, I had my first book out, Happy, 5 years ago or something, and that accidentally created this little world that I'm now living in.
Beautiful. So you've probably seen quite a shift, because I know that when we started YuLife talking about insurance that inspires people to live their best lives, people thought we were absolutely flipping nuts, right? Like, this is the insurance industry. So don't talk like that. This is not how insurance works, guys.
We don't have pink giraffes
Exactly,
and animals with big hearts. No.
And I imagine that, you presented Love Island at one point, right? So coming from...
Isn't that mad? That is like another life. I actually had forgotten until you said that.
Sorry.
I was about 23, and I tell you what, it was the best 2 months of my life. I was in Fiji for 8 weeks, living the dream. That was another lifetime ago, before I had kids.
Yeah. You've been on that journey.
Yeah.
Of
quite an extreme journey.
Look, Love Island definitely represents one side of that.
Yeah, we're all for it.
Mental health journey.
Yeah.
What triggered that shift?
I mean, definitely there was different factors, sort of experience, age. I started work so young. I was 15 when I started in TV. So by the time I was even doing Love Island when I was 22-ish, I'd already had quite a substantial career. So I think there was a part of me in my late 20s that started to get a bit complacent, and I didn't like that. I thought, why am I feeling a bit whatever about this stuff? I should be as excited as I was when I started. I should be as grateful as I was when I started. So I was a bit concerned about that, but I was going through the motions. I still loved a lot of what I was doing. But then I had my own sort of mental health challenges where I had a period of depression that was quite lengthy. I was on medication for quite a while. Then subsequently, later down the line, I believe that I kind of came out of a depression very slowly. I don't know how it exactly works, but this is my own personal experience. It was quite a long period that I sort of gradually came out of. And then that's when the panic started. It was almost like I was resurfacing, and then I had to process it all. And I started getting panic attacks out of the blue, really back to back, and really extremely, that made me stop doing certain jobs. I couldn't do live broadcasting. I still find that triggering, so I have to watch and pick and choose quite carefully as to what I do. But even driving fast in a car, I couldn't drive on a motorway until about a year ago. I did a lot of specific therapy to help me with that, and it has. I'm now like bombing down the motorway just fine, but I had 5 years where I couldn't even go on an A road. I couldn't breathe. It was quite extreme. So there was a sort of suffering in silence to begin with, and then I had this interesting moment where I was talking to the publishers I'd already been working with about doing something completely different and new. Yeah. And I said, look, I've never talked to anyone about this, but I can either write a book about, because they were like, oh, let's do something about well-being. It seems like a buzzy thing. And I said, well, I can do that. I can do a surface level one, or I can tell you what I've really just been going through in my life, and that I'm on antidepressants and and they were like, well, if you feel comfortable doing that. So it felt very risky because I hadn't had that conversation publicly before. Yeah. But I kind of thought, what have I got to lose? If people judge me because of that, fine. It's what I'm going through, and hopefully it will resonate. And luckily it did. And I'm, I still do therapy all the time. I'm, it's a daily commitment to not have therapy daily, but to commit to feeling well. It's not like, oh, and that's now all over and I'm, living my best life. I still have to really watch it. I'm smashing it. I still have to really watch it with the panic and put myself in situations where I know I'm going to feel safe. I haven't had a depressive episode for quite some time, so I'm really glad about that. But I'm also beyond grateful that I get to talk about this stuff all the time, and more importantly, hear other people's take on it, because there's only so much waffling on I can do. I want to listen to stories, share those, use my platform to give other people the opportunity to tell their amazing stories. So now I get to do all this stuff. So out of complete blackness, all of this beautiful stuff has come from it. So I was really at one point drowning in regret about certain things in my life, but I've been able to sort of overcome that by going, none of this would be happening unless I'd felt terrible. I'd probably still be doing Love Island or something. Do you know what I mean? I mean, no problem with that, but I really, really love what I'm doing, and I've got real fire in my belly about it.
Really glad to say that's beautiful. There's an ancient Jewish concept of Yerida, Tzorech Aliyah, which is a descent for the sake of an ascent. You go down in order to ascend higher.
I love that.
So I think that really resonates.
Yeah, that's what it was. And I think from the stories that I'm hearing, it's so often that that someone's been through something so terrible. They've gained lots of stuff on the way, like you're saying, that gorgeous ascent, and whether that's personally sort of new strength or whatever. But I think then the real gift is sharing that and being able to help other people or connect, to have stories resonate. So Yeah, that's so lovely. I love that.
Yeah, it's a
Gorgeous.
lovely,
Yeah,
we've-
beautiful.
We've got some lovely questions coming in from people, if that's okay.
Yeah,
And
of course.
I wonder if I can ask a couple of them, and then
Yeah.
maybe I'll close the question. But motivation, right? The motivation for yourself to keep to that daily practice.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I should say the names of the people who's asked the question. This is a question from,
It's quite nice to
from
give them a
Helen.
shout out.
Yeah, okay.
isn't it?
So shout out to Helen.
Shout out, Helen.
How do you maintain that motivation to keep to your daily practice of everyday healthy habits, whatever it is that works for you?
I think because I felt so terrible before, there is no
No
option
feedback.
for me. Like I can't. If I even leave it a little too long that I haven't done something quite basic like exercise, going out for a walk, going for a run, doing whatever it is, it doesn't matter. I'm not fussed about what exercise, but if I haven't moved my body in a couple of days, I can just start to feel that little funk coming in, and I'm like, no, I don't want to go there. I don't want that funky, horrible, foggy. So it's stuff like that where I just think I can't, or if I eat badly, or if I'm pushing myself into work situations where I know panic could be around, and I'm not giving myself the time out just to be on my own, it's just not worth it. It's not worth it for my kids, my husband. I'll come home feeling ratty and not give my best to them. So it kind of goes beyond motivation, and is just there's no question I'm not going back to how I used to feel. So I have to keep doing this stuff every day.
It's like a survival instinct.
Yeah, absolutely.
But,
and I know better now. I didn't know then.
There's no excuse now. Yeah.
No, exactly. Back then I was just kind of free falling, but now it's like, I know the rules, just stick to them. And my rules will be different to your rules, to everybody else's rules. You have to find your own.
And that's, a really powerful point of that extrinsic and extrinsic motivation for doing that. You've got a very deep intrinsic motivation for doing that.
Yeah.
Part of what we built at YuLife is the ability to support people with that balance of extrinsic and intrinsic motivation.
Yeah.
To capture those everyday healthy habits and kind of bank them. And you get that bit of reward for your everyday walk, or for practicing mindfulness.
Yeah.
A bit of community spirit to it, of progressing through a leaderboard and challenges, and that brings people together on that shared mission of everyday healthy habits.
Yeah, I think community is certainly important. Like you just said, having that group mentality, and the intrinsic bit being, if you've just got stuff being prescribed to you, like you should do this, you should do that, you'll fall off the wagon immediately. But if you feel it and you know that there's no other option, it's like you just have to, there is no point in trying to dodge it or avoid it. Just do it.
So true. This is a question from Leanne. You've got a lot on your plate, right? You've clearly got a very busy schedule, and the things that you need to do in order to, safeguard your mental health. When you've just got those 10 minutes of downtime, and there's nothing that you need to be doing, and nothing that you ought to be doing, what do you do that makes you happy?
Well, I am obsessed with being creative. It's a huge part of me feeling good. And I almost treat that, this is a bit of a loophole, as meditation, because I do still struggle with just sort of sitting there and going, okay, just going to clear my mind, and everything's going to go. Creativity is my absolute escape. So it could be painting, writing. I'm actually doing some creative writing at the moment just for me. And it might end up going out there. I haven't told my literary agent. Certainly haven't told my publishers. I'm just doing some stuff for me. So like yesterday, I finished radio, did a couple of interviews, had some emails to do. And then before the school one, I had about an hour. And I was like, I'm just going to get lost in this little world that I'm creating. And there's no deadline. There's no massive goal. I'm just doing it because I enjoy it. But I have a deep need to be creative. I think most of us do. It will just be channeled in a different way. Mine's definitely writing, drawing, painting. And I just feel boosted, buzzed. I love it. So I usually do something that I love for me on my own. I in those moments, I don't want to see anyone at all. So solitary creativity.
Thank you very much for that. And I think we've got time for one last question before we have our closing thoughts, which is a question from, oh, wow. So I've got two wonderful questions here. Let's go with this one, which is a really relevant question for many of our HR directors here. We've got lots of people who clearly feel the need to implement this philosophy in their workplace. And, people who are tuning in to listen to you and are inspired by the work that you do, they're coming up against barriers with the people around them on a daily basis. People who don't share that enthusiasm, don't see the importance of it. How do you convince the naysayers?
I don't think you can. I think it's almost a waste of time trying to convince people. I
Okay.
think if you can demonstrate that it's working for you, that's much more powerful. To walk into work feeling boosted, calm, able to deal with whatever stresses come your way that day. That's amazing for people to see
Let's say
that.
you've got, we've got one of our wonderful HR directors here who's trying to convince their CEO, their CFO to unlock that budget that they need.
Right, okay.
How do you do that?
Okay, I get that. Well, again, I think,
Tune into a podcast.
yeah, podcast. I mean, I was going to say, like, a lot of it is storytelling, like hearing people's stories. I think storytelling is seen as archaic and we don't use it as much these days. And it's the most important thing to hear how people have come from a dark place to a better place, whatever it might be. But I think, who doesn't want to go to work and feel good? I don't think there's a single person that has a different sort of thought process when it comes to turning up to work and seeing your team happy. You want to work with happy people. I only want to be around happy people. I think you get to an age where you think, I don't want to hang out with people that are negative, bringing me down. And I think it's the same at work. You want the team to feel cohesive and part of something, and like they're all, going home happy. And I think if there are simple things that we all know about now, there's barely an excuse. We all know what works and what doesn't in terms of feeling good physically and mentally. We're not always going to nail it, but there are some basics we can all do. If we know that that's achievable at work and it's possible, and there are so many different resources now that workplaces can use, whether it's you've got Wonderful Wrongen, but so many apps out there and resources online that you can deal with, or having things in person. If that's available, why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you?
Beautiful. Storytelling is the key.
It is.
About inspiring people, and you can tell stories to put kids to sleep, or you can tell stories to wake them up.
Absolutely, to uplift and inspire, and I think it's so important.
Beautiful. And look, we've just got a minute or two left, so just as a closing thought, you're a mum of 2 or 4, extended family, which is beautiful. And as a parent, I always know that kids is getting one out the other ear necessarily. And you're advocating all this well-being, you're advocating these messages. If there's one message that you thought, this is the one I really want my kids to hear, they ignore everything else I've ever told them as a parent. This is the thing that I really want to make sure they take away from it. What would you say to them?
It's so tricky because you're right, especially with my 9-year-old, he's an amazing, creative, quite eccentric character, and he doesn't want to do what I'm telling him to do. And if anything, he'll do the opposite of what I tell him to do. So I have to kind of go, shall I do the opposite? And then he'll do the thing that I want him to do. Like I'm trying to do mind tricks, whatever. But I think the only thing that I'm really trying to hit home with is to communicate. And sometimes Rex will come home from school. He did it yesterday. Terrible mood. Didn't want to give me eye contact. And I know something's up. And I'm like, what's going on? He will not tell me a thing about what's going on or what's happened in his day. And usually it takes in the moment till he gets into the top bunk and it's just me and him. And I lean in and go, where are we at? What's going on? And there's no pressure. And then he'll open up and then he'll say, oh, well, this happened at school. I don't know what to do about it. And I just want them to feel comfortable to be able to talk to me, and for them to then go into life, being able to do that at work with their friends, with their partners in the future, whatever it might be, to be able to talk openly and not feel ashamed, or because, I went through a huge period of my life feeling ashamed. I shouldn't be feeling like this. Yeah. People must assume all these things about me. How can I feel down with the life I have, whatever it might be? I don't want my kids to feel they can't say what they're feeling. So I'm always trying to encourage them to be honest, to speak their truth, for me to do the same back to them. And also saying sorry is a big one for me. I always say sorry to them. And now naturally, like, if I've sort of said something that I shouldn't have or been a bit ratty, I'll always go, look, Mummy's exhausted. I'm sorry. But now they come to me and go, oh, I'm really sorry, that was grumpy earlier. And I think that's such an important one in life, that we can get humble and apologise when needed.
Beautiful. With that words of wisdom, just want to say thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. It was so lovely. I love that.
Really great to chat.
Thank
you everyone for tuning in on a busy Wednesday morning.
I can clarify it's Wednesday. Yeah.
Well, busy Wednesday morning. Thank you so much, everyone. And thank you very, very much again.
Thank you. Thank you, Sam.